Hello, General Hospital will reveal. The latest developments from General Hospital have placed Dr. Portia Robinson at the center of a professional reckoning, one that leaves her neither entirely victorious nor utterly defeated. After a series of emotionally charged discussions, particularly with Laura Collins and Tracy Quartermain, Portia has managed to regain her position at General Hospital. However, it comes with strings attached, revealing a subtle but significant shift in her authority. Rather than reinstating her in full as co-chief of staff, the hospital appears to be offering her a lesser role, one that allows her to remain part of the institution, but not necessarily lead it. This partial reinstatement speaks volumes about how the hospital perceives her recent choices, and it sets the stage for a more complex emotional journey than a simple return to work. It's clear that Portia's appeal to the powers that be, likely heartfelt and articulate, was enough to prevent a total dismissal. But the compromise offered might not sit well with her. For someone who once held significant administrative power and made decisions affecting the entire hospital, the transition to a less commanding role may feel like a quiet punishment cloaked in diplomacy. Much like Detective Harrison Chase, who was demoted to patrol officer earlier this week. Portia now finds herself in a similar predicament, still employed, still within the same ecosystem, but stripped of the gravitas that once defined her role. Emotionally, this demotion, veiled though it may be, could deal a serious blow to Portia's confidence. Known for her dedication and professionalism, the fact that her decisions brought her to this moment is likely to haunt her. She may experience waves of self-blame, reflecting on the choices she made, both in her personal and professional life, that ultimately led to this shakeup. The weight of regret could become a silent companion as she walks the same hospital halls, no longer as a leader, but as a peer, someone who must now rebuild trust and credibility one patient at a time. The sense of humiliation might be profound. After all, stepping back into a workplace where everyone knows you were once at the top, only to now return in a diminished capacity, creates an unavoidable air of discomfort. That internal struggle between the desire to hold her head high and the temptation to retreat in shame may mark the beginning of Portia's slow reinvention. She could find herself hesitating to engage fully with her colleagues, unsure of how to navigate their glances, their silences, or their judgment. There is an invisible scar that such a professional setback leaves, especially when you once held the power to shape hospital policy and now must carry out decisions made by someone else. And yet, even in this painful repositioning, there may be a glimmer of relief. Portia is on the cusp of motherhood, and with that comes a natural need to recalibrate one's priorities. The breakneck pace of hospital leadership may not be compatible with the demands of impending parenthood, and perhaps deep down, she knows that an intense job like co-chief of staff can take its toll, even without the added weight of personal upheaval. Now, with a more manageable role, she may finally have the space to breathe, to slow down, and to consider what really matters. Her demotion could, paradoxically, give her the peace she hadn't realized she needed. Still, this outcome doesn't eliminate the emotional complexity of her situation. The loss of status is not just about power, it's about identity. Portia has always been someone who led with strength and conviction. To now be asked to stand aside, even while being allowed to remain present, reshapes how she sees herself. It forces her to confront questions she may not have been ready to face. Can she accept a quieter existence? Is it possible to derive satisfaction from healing, rather than leading? Or will the shadow of what she once had continue to haunt her every move within those hospital walls? Moreover, there's the question of how others perceive her. Will her colleagues treat her differently? Knowing she no longer carries the same authority, will they whisper behind her back, pity her, or worse, disrespect her? The fear of being seen as weakened or disgraced might drive Portia into emotional isolation, even as she continues to function outwardly as a capable and composed physician. She may withdraw socially, avoid staff meetings, or overcompensate by throwing herself into clinical work, all in a bid to distract from the silent grief of losing what she once built. And what of her relationship with Curtis, or the ongoing familial tensions that have simmered just beneath the surface in recent months? Professional instability often brings personal vulnerability into sharper focus. As she navigates this uncertain terrain at work, she may find her emotional boundaries tested at home as well. Her ability to be present for those she loves could be compromised by the mental toll of her work-related identity, crisis, or perhaps she will lean into that vulnerability and discover that stepping down professionally allows her to step up. Personally, a role she hasn't always had time to prioritize. The parallels between Portia and Chase are not incidental. Both are respected professionals facing public consequences for private missteps. Both are learning how to redefine themselves in roles that no longer offer the prestige or influence they once held. Their journeys are a reflection of a broader theme rippling through General Hospital's current narrative landscape one, in which characters must reckon with their fallibility, recalibrate their ambitions, and learn to find meaning outside of titles and power. In the end, Portia's partial reinstatement is neither triumph nor tragedy. It is a pause, a pivot, a moment of quiet reckoning where she must choose how to carry herself in this new chapter. Whether she rises with renewed humility and grace or becomes embittered by what she perceives as institutional, betrayal remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, her presence at General Hospital will no longer be defined by authority alone, but by how she chooses to rebuild what was lost. The evolving professional status of doctor, Portia Robinson within the halls of General Hospital, is more than just an administrative footnote. It is the delicate unraveling of power dynamics, emotional resilience, and institutional identity. Her partial reinstatement, while appearing to many as a compromise, is in fact the beginning of a broader recalibration of roles, not only within the hospital's leadership structure, but within her personal life as well. Central to this shift is the increasing focus on her relationship with Dr. Isaiah Gannon, a man whose moral compass and quiet ambition have long remained steady, even in the face of emotional entanglement. What once seemed like a quiet, supportive romance now finds itself placed under the microscope as Portia's fall from administrative grace inadvertently establishes a new sense of equality between them. Isaiah's concerns were never born out of ego, but out of foresight. From the very beginning of their relationship, he was acutely aware of the potential ramifications of being romantically linked to someone in a superior position. In a hospital teeming with unspoken alliances and professional competition, any romantic connection between staff members, especially between someone with significant authority and someone without it, inevitably invites speculation. He worried about how he would be perceived as a competent physician who earned his place, or as someone who benefited from the silent boost of proximity to power. It's a quiet anxiety that could taint even the most genuine success. Every patient recovery, every surgical triumph, every commendation might have carried a silent question mark: was it earned? Or was it gifted? Now, with Portia no longer serving as co-chief of staff, a subtle but important reset occurs. The imbalance of perception begins to dissipate. They are no longer seen as superior and subordinate, but as equals. For Isaiah, this removes a psychological barrier. His achievements going forward cannot be misconstrued as the result of favoritism, because the dynamics have changed. There is no administrative advantage to his personal relationship now. What remains is the merit of his own skill set, his own discipline, and his own quiet perseverance. For Portia, this new parity could bring unexpected emotional relief, no longer burdened with the pressure of always having to prove she could be objective in matters involving Isaiah. She can begin to explore their relationship with a deeper sense of authenticity and mutual respect, no longer filtered through the lens of workplace hierarchy. But even as this personal rebalancing takes place, professional questions loom, questions that reach beyond Portia's individual journey and into the broader structure of leadership at GH. When Portia speaks of returning, she makes it clear she doesn't merely want her job back. She wants her title back, co-chief of staff. The very word co implies balance, mutual respect, and shared responsibility. It speaks to a belief in leadership that is not about dominance, but about partnership. Yet for a co-leadership to exist, both positions must be filled. And right now, the status of her former counterpart, Dr. Terry Randolph, is shrouded in silence. Terry Randolph, portrayed by Cassandra James, has been notably absent since April of the previous year. Her disappearance from both the screen and the narrative leaves a vacuum, not just in storylines but in hospital governance. In Portia's absence, logic dictates that Terry would have assumed full leadership responsibilities. But if Terry is also no longer present, then GH is operating without the kind of structured guidance it so desperately needs. The very foundation of its leadership model, collaboration, co-decision making, shared oversight, is at risk of collapsing into a unilateral command, or worse, bureaucratic limbo. In that context, the refusal to reinstate Portia to her former role takes on new weight. If Terry is gone and Portia is deemed unfit to return, then someone else must be waiting in the wings. Someone new must step up to fill the leadership void. And that prospect raises both logistical and emotional stakes for every character involved. Portia, watching from the sidelines, must now endure the psychological sting of being replaced in a role she once earned. It's not merely about power, it's about legacy, relevance, and the fear that her contributions may be forgotten or overwritten. Enter the speculative possibility of Dr. Britt Westbourne's return to administrative leadership. Once a disgraced physician with a checkered past, Britt has undergone a redemptive arc that makes her a viable candidate for renewed authority. Having recently regained her medical license, she is now navigating the early stages of reintegration into the GH community. Her road to redemption has not been easy, marked by personal loss, public skepticism, and the long, painful process of rebuilding trust. And yet, those very struggles have carved out a depth in her character that was once missing. She has learned to lead not by command but by example, not through fear but through empathy. If the hospital's board is seeking someone with the resilience to weather institutional storms, Britt may, ironically, be the most qualified. Britt's potential reinstatement also serves as a sharp emotional counterpoint for Portia. The two women have walked very different paths, but their stories now risk converging in a way that places them in direct professional opposition. For Portia, seeing Britt ascend while she remains sidelined might ignite a new internal conflict. Will she see Britt's rise as a signal to fight harder for her place at the table, or as proof that the table is already too full? Will she interpret Britt's comeback as validation of institutional mercy, or as a betrayal of her own years of service? These are not just administrative dilemmas, they are existential crises wrapped in the language of workplace bureaucracy. Meanwhile, the hospital itself faces a critical juncture. Its leadership must decide not just who is most qualified to lead, but what kind of leadership it wants to embody. Will it favor continuity and reward long-time service? Or will it lean into transformation and symbolic rebirth? Portia represents stability, knowledge, and long-term investment in the hospital's mission. Britt represents redemption, growth, and the promise of second chances. The choice between them will send a message to everyone working within those walls about what kind of institution GH aspires to be and what it is willing to forgive. Beyond the professional and romantic implications, this entire scenario challenges Portia's sense of self. She is a woman defined by discipline, achievement, and high standards not just for others, but for herself. Her fall from authority, however partial, shakes the very foundation of her identity. She now walks the halls of GH not as a leader, but as a peer. Not as a decision maker, but as a follower of decisions made by others. This transition demands emotional adjustment, but it also opens the door to a deeper kind of introspection. Who is Portia when she is no longer defined by her title? What value does she bring when stripped of institutional power? Can she still mentor, inspire, and heal not just patients, but herself? Her relationship with Isaiah may be her greatest compass during this time. In a setting where everything else feels uncertain, personal connection may be the one constant she can rely on, but even that will be tested. As they grow closer, they must navigate a new set of emotional boundaries, shaped not by the pressures of power imbalance, but by the vulnerability that comes with equal footing. Portia may find herself leaning on Isaiah more than she ever anticipated, not as a colleague, not even as a lover, but as a mirror to her own evolving sense of worth. In this tangled web of leadership shifts, personal recalibrations, and institutional politics, General Hospital is doing what it does best, telling stories not just about medicine, but about the human condition. Portia's journey is a masterclass in how professional identity, personal relationships, and public perception intersect in ways both subtle and seismic. Her future remains uncertain. Will she reclaim her former title? Will she pivot to a new role entirely? Or will she discover that her true power lies not in titles, but in how she carries herself through the storm? One thing is certain, whatever comes next for Portia Robinson will not just be a job, it will be a reckoning. But even as Portia struggles to adjust to her new reality, life inside General Hospital refuses to slow down. The demands of the job remain relentless. Patients still fill the waiting rooms. Emergencies still interrupt quiet moments. Colleagues still whisper. Not out of cruelty, but out of curiosity. And within that noise, Portia must rediscover her place not as a leader issuing orders, but as a practitioner reclaiming her purpose. This is perhaps her greatest challenge yet. For so long, her identity was entwined with her title. Being co-chief of staff wasn't just a role, it was a reflection of everything she'd worked for: the long hours, the impossible cases, the late nights reviewing staffing rosters and budget reports. To now walk those same corridors stripped of that status is a form of quiet grief, one not marked by tears, but by silence. By the way, people hesitate before speaking to her. By the way, she hesitates before entering a room she used to command. And yet, beneath the surface of her professional reorientation. Something unexpected begins to grow, the fragile seed of humility, not humiliation, but the kind that blooms when forced to see oneself without armor. Portia starts to ask questions she never had time for before. Who is she when she's not setting policy? Who is she when no one needs her approval to move forward? What does it mean to heal? Not only the patients before her, but also the emotional wounds left behind by disappointment and unmet expectations. Ironically, it is this very fall from grace that begins to restore something else. She had nearly lost empathy. In the past, her responsibilities had often demanded detachment triage decisions, disciplinary actions, administrative coldness masked as clinical efficiency. Now, without the burden of command, she feels again. She sits longer with her patients. She listens more attentively to their stories. She takes an extra moment in the locker room to ask a nurse how they're doing. Not because she's obligated to as a supervisor, but because she remembers what it feels like to not be seen. Meanwhile, the hospital buzzes with anticipation. Rumors swirl about an upcoming leadership announcement. A search committee has allegedly been formed. Names are being floated. Interviews are happening behind closed doors. And HR is reportedly vetting candidate histories. The vacancy left by Terry's absence and Portia's partial demotion must be filled. And the clock is ticking. If no one steps into the role soon, the hospital risks administrative drift, a dangerous condition in any high-functioning medical institution. Portia knows she's no longer the frontrunner. That bitter truth tastes even sharper when she overhears junior residents speculating about a fresh face being brought in. There's talk of an outsider, someone with experience in urban hospital reform, someone with accolades, but no ties to Port Charles. The idea stings. To be passed over would be hard enough. To be erased from the institution's leadership memory entirely, unbearable. And yet, Portia does not retaliate. She doesn't scheme. She doesn't whisper to allies or pull strings. Instead, she chooses the harder path to rebuild herself. Not for others. Not to prove a point. But to find meaning again in the thing that brought her here in the first place, medicine. The work, the privilege of healing. Isaiah watches this transformation with both pride and sorrow. He sees her waking earlier, staying later, immersing herself in patient care like never before. He sees her avoiding the boardroom, but finding peace in the trauma bay. He wonders if she is preparing herself to accept this new chapter or if she's quietly waiting for another door to open. The relationship deepens, but so does the unspoken tension. For now that they stand on equal footing professionally, a new question arises. What if one of them begins to rise while the other remains stagnant? What if he is offered a promotion, a research fellowship, a position on a national task force? Will Portia be happy for him or haunted by the reflection of what she lost? Isaiah, ever perceptive, begins to understand that their equality may come at an emotional cost. The balance they now enjoy is built on the ruins of Portia's former ambition. It is not resentment she carries, but a quiet ache, a reminder that love, while a source of strength, cannot always shield you from systemic disappointment. And then, as if scripted by fate, an internal memo circulates across the hospital. The board has officially reopened the search for a new co-chief of staff. Britt Westbourne's name is mentioned. So is another doctor, Link Walcott, a high-profile trauma surgeon recently relocated from Chicago. Neither name is a surprise. Both are capable. Both represent a future. Portia is no longer at the center of... Portia reads the memo and doesn't cry. She doesn't storm into Laura's office or demand explanations. She simply folds the email, metaphorically and emotionally, and returns to her patient's chart. There is a heartbeat to monitor, a diagnosis to refine, a life that needs saving. And in that moment, she remembers leadership is not always conferred from above. Sometimes it is carved from the quiet, unseen decisions made in the margins of crisis. She doesn't know where this new road will lead. Maybe she'll pursue a fellowship in mental health integration. Maybe she'll become the hospital's quiet backbone, the doctor everyone turns to in chaos, even if no plaque bears her name. Or maybe one day the board will realize the wisdom they left behind and ask her to return, not because she begged, but because she endured. For now, Portia walks forward not as co-chief, not as Isaiah's girlfriend, not as the woman who used to lead, but as herself. And perhaps that is the most powerful title of all.